Take a look at these two scenes. The first from Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island.
This place makes me wonder, which would be worse? To live as a monster, or to die as a good man?
Now, watch this scene from Christopher Nolan's Memento.
You know, I think I'd rather be mistaken for a dead guy than a killer. I might hang on to this for a while.
In both of these examples, the protagonist presents two paths of life. He can either embrace the man he really is, or continue living as someone he's not. Just a heads up, full spoiler warning for Shutter Island and Memento. In the first film, we find DiCaprio's character Teddy after learning that he murdered his own wife. His life as a detective was all a delusion, an elaborate treatment plan to bring him back to reality.
Why are you here?
There never was an insane patient hiding in the shadows. It was him all along.
Because I killed my wife.
This interaction between Teddy and Chuck is the final test to see if he regressed or if the treatment stuck. At first, it doesn't seem like it, but then, with a drag of his cigarette, Teddy proposes the dilemma.
To live as a monster, or to die as a good man?
With this question, he's revealing that he knows who he is and what he's done, and he would prefer to be lobotomized than to live with that guilt. The burden of self-loathing is too heavy to bear, so he willingly takes the easy way out, dying as an honorable detective trying to avenge his wife, instead of living as the monster in the mirror, his true self. Similarly, in the second film, Guy Pearce's character Leonard has been confronted with a disturbing reality. For who knows how long, he's been piecing together the clues to find the man who raped and murdered his wife.
Now we're getting somewhere.
The same man responsible for giving him his present condition. Instead of insanity, Leonard suffers from short-term memory loss.
They treating you okay?
I don't remember.
When the clues lead him to his target and revenge is there for the taking, reality is thrown in his face.
Look, Lenny, I was the cop assigned to your wife's case. I believed you. I thought you deserved a chance for revenge. I'm the one that helped you find the other guy in your bathroom that night. We found him, you killed him. But you didn't remember. So I helped you. Start looking again. Looking for the guy you already killed.
Revenge was satisfied a long time ago. But what's worse is that his wife survived the assault. Leonard is the one who killed her. That truth is too painful to accept, so he continues in the lie.
I don't know my own wife?
Just like Teddy, when faced with the truth of who he is, Leonard would prefer to perpetuate his own delusion in order to be happy.
Do I lie to myself to be happy? In your case, Teddy, yes, I will.
In both of these films, Shutter Island and Memento, the protagonist is an unreliable narrator whose perception of reality dramatically differs from the truth. Their conditions may be different, but their coping mechanisms are almost identical. Single-handedly, he is the one with blood in his hands, crafting a mystery that can never be solved.
Latest.
A maze with no end to keep him from ever facing the man he hates most, himself. The scariest part about it is, he doesn't realize he's doing it. It's a lot easier on your conscience to live in a world where you're the good guy trying to set things right. And it's possible too. All you have to do is control the mirrors you allow yourself to look through. For the purposes of this video, we're going to focus on Leonard and unpack the implications of his particular condition.
You're just blissfully ignorant, aren't you?
Look, I have this condition.
Yeah, I know all about your condition, Leonard.
To do this, we need to get inside his head and view the world as he sees it. Understanding how Leonard perceives reality allows us to see how the condition that torments him each day is also the very thing he needs to keep living. His circumstances doom him to a never-ending cycle of self-deceit and destruction, but within that cycle, he finds his purpose through revenge. We'll get to all of that in just a second, but before we do, let's talk about the film. Memento, released in 2000, is Christopher Nolan's second feature film and my personal favorite of his filmography. It stars Guy Pearce as Leonard Shelby, with Carrie-Anne Moss and Joe Pantoliano in supporting roles. The original idea for Memento actually came from the director's younger brother, Jonathan Nolan, who was working on a short story at the time.
While we were driving from Chicago to Los Angeles, he said, I'm working on this story and it's about this guy with this condition, you know, he can't make new memories and he's looking for revenge. He's looking for the guy who killed his wife. I just thought it was such a fantastic idea.
Jonathan went on to publish his short story entitled Memento Mori in Esquire magazine. Memento Mori is a Latin phrase that translates to, remember that you must die. For the film, the phrase was simplified to just memento, meaning remember. The Latin tense of the verb reads as a warning, inferring a sense of urgency and desperation which parallels the themes of the film. I highly recommend you read the short story for yourself. There's a link to it in the description. The short story offers some valuable insight into Leonard's psyche, so I'll periodically reference it to help understand his character a bit better. The plot of the film follows an ex-insurance agent who's fully devoted his life, or what's left of it, to finding the man who raped and murdered his wife.
I've told you this before, haven't I?
A cop named Teddy is the closest thing Leonard has to a friend, although his motivations are in question for much of the movie.
You know, I've had more rewarding friendships than this one. Although I do get to keep telling the same jokes.
As Leonard works to solve the case, he gets mixed up with some ill-intentioned characters who prey on his weakness for their own benefit.
We'll still be best friends. Or maybe even lovers.
Christopher Nolan is obsessed with manipulating time. In almost every one of his movies, he engages the audience by subverting their reliance on time's normal procession.
Well, every hour we spend on that planet will be 7 years back on Earth. That's relativity, folks.
In a dream, your mind functions more quickly, therefore, time seems to feel more slow.
5 minutes in the real world gives you an hour in the dream.
Why don't you see what you can get up to in 5 minutes?
Why does it feel so strange?
You're not shooting the bullet. You're catching it.
Whoa.
There are many more examples, but the point is, Memento has its own unique way of messing with time. Nolan mirrors Leonard's disorientation and confusion through backwards storytelling, effectively placing the audience inside his subjective mind. While time progresses linearly, it's the audience's perception of reality that's changed. The best way to control a viewer's perception is to provide only as much information as the characters are afforded, to limit the context.
And my approach to doing that was to effectively tell the story backwards. That way, when we meet a character, we don't know, just like the protagonist, how he's met that person, whether he's even met that person before, or whether or not they should be trusted, that kind of thing.
Within the backwards running subjective narrative of the film, there are black and white sequences breaking it up. These pull the audience out of Leonard's head so we can see him in an objective light.
And the color sequence is the voice of the mind. It's the first person. It's very much his thoughts as he's thinking them. In the black and white scenes, they sound a bit like interview grabs. To give the audience a little bit of information, objective information about how this guy lives his life and what he thinks.
Now, pulling these parts together, let's see what the timeline looks like drawn out.
Best way to draw it is as a hairpin, like that. That's basically the end of the movie. This stuff is the black and white stuff. This is color, and this is running backwards as a series of jumps. And what we do is we cut between the two the whole way through. So we alternate scene here, scene there, scene there, scene there, scene there, scene there, and they meet towards the end of the film.
Editing the film in this way means that the beginning of the movie is actually the narrative end, and we spend the runtime of the film figuring out how we got there. The scenes play in forward motion, but every following scene doubles back and ends at the point where the previous scene began. It's a leapfrogging motion where every scene ends with a cliffhanger.
The cliffhanger or the question and then the answer, and it's presenting that as an alternating rhythm the whole way through the film.
Repetition where scenes overlap helps the audience to orient themselves and place new information in the context of what they already know. The film provides you with just enough information to keep up, putting the intellect of the audience to the test, rather than spoon-feeding exposition.
The point of the film is to throw you into a sort of little land of confusion and see how you deal with that.
As you watch the film, as you engage with it, you become part of the experiment. Your memory is tested, your loyalties to certain characters are challenged, and you're invited to question the reliability of both the main protagonist and yourself. Now, back to Leonard.
Lenny!
Our protagonist suffers from a form of short-term memory loss that prevents him from making new memories while still hanging on to his long-term memory.
Now, the doctors assure me that there's a real condition called anterograde memory loss, or short-term memory loss. It's rare.
While trying to save his wife the night of her assault, Leonard was slammed to the ground, causing permanent brain damage. That incident is the last memory that stuck. Now his life is made up of fragments, just a few minutes at a time, completely detached from one another. Every time he wakes up or comes to his senses, it's as if no time has passed from the incident.
Honey, it's late.
These increments of awareness last as long as he keeps his attention focused. Sometimes 10 minutes, maybe 20 if he's lucky.
Oh, keep focused. Keep focused. Keep it in mind.
If something causes him to lose focus, everything resets and whatever he was just doing is erased from his mind.
Find a pen.
As you can imagine, this makes it impossible to live a normal life, let alone play detective. You don't know where you are, how you got there, or what you were just doing minutes ago.
He destroyed my ability to live.
To make the best of his situation, Leonard relies on his habits formed before the incident and the guidance of his most recent past self.
Habit and routine make my life possible. Conditioning. Acting on instinct.
Everywhere he goes, he takes pictures, writes notes, and for the really important things, he gets tattoos. He's effectively outsourcing the work of his faulty brain to external reminders around him. He lives for the sole purpose of getting revenge on his wife's assailant, John G., a man who no longer exists because Leonard already got his revenge. He's hunting for ghosts, but thanks to his condition and his pal Teddy, he's able to find them.
So where are you? You're in some motel room? It feels like maybe it's just the first time you've been there, but it's kind of hard to say. I don't know.
This is how Leonard begins his day. With his condition, though, days aren't really a meaningful way to measure time. This same moment could have occurred 10 times in a row and he'd be none the wiser. You need a way to prevent yourself from getting stuck in a loop. More than that, you need a system that'll help you move forward and do something with your life. So how do you do that? By setting yourself up for success the next time you wake up. Here's an excerpt from the short story that describes this dynamic. This is the tragedy of life, because for a few minutes of every day, every man becomes a genius. Moments of clarity, insight, whatever you want to call them. But then the genius, the savant, has to hand over the controls to the next guy down the pike. Most likely the guy who just wants to eat potato chips. And insight and brilliance and salvation are all entrusted to a moron or a hedonist or a narcoleptic. The only way out of this mess, of course, is to take steps to ensure that you control the idiots that you become. The best way to do this is with a list. So, with the understanding that in a few short moments, the next guy in line will pick up where he left off, Leonard has to do his best to bridge the gap. Each note, photograph, and tattoo are Leonard's ways of capturing the attention of his future self and ensuring that that stranger will stick to the program. In this world, in the 10 minutes that you exist, you are all that you have, so you have to trust yourself. Interpersonal relationships are thrown out the window. All the answers come from you.
What, I haven't made a strong enough impression on you?
I wouldn't be too hard on yourself.
This is an incredibly dangerous position to be in. It completely detaches you from any external morality and puts the power of defining what is true in the palm of your hand. The result is a life devoid of all consequences. What good would prison do to a guy that can't even remember that he doesn't want to be there? Leonard uses his condition against himself, redefining reality for the next blank slate that wakes up. That idiot won't know the difference. Anything negative or harmful Leonard does will simply be left to fade into oblivion. Cross out a few lines here, burn some pictures there, and voila, an innocent man with a clean conscience. The next guy down the line will make his own unbiased assessments based on the information gifted to him, unaware of what was withheld.
You don't want the truth. You make up your own truth, like your police file. It was complete when I gave it to you. Who took out the 12 pages?
With an unwavering reliance on his lists and notes, he trusts that his handwriting will direct him toward the truth. Because if he can't even trust himself, he's as good as dead. But of course he can trust himself. Why couldn't he? It's not like he's killed somebody before. Or wait, yeah, he has. He just doesn't realize that he has. Is there a difference?
Well, certainly the unreliable narrator, particularly in noir, I think is something I'm fascinated by. And finding a character, creating a character who is by definition unreliable, but is fooling himself that he's not.
It should matter to Leonard that he's a killer, but it doesn't. How could it if he's totally unaware of who he really is?
I am Leonard Shelby. I am from San Francisco.
That's who you were. You do not know who you are. What you've become since the incident.
He's both his greatest adversary and greatest ally, concealing the blood on his hands so he can live with authentic self-esteem.
Lenny, come on. You're not a killer.
That's why you're so good at it.
Fortunately, the world doesn't revolve around Leonard, and though he may be oblivious to the damage he's done, the repercussions still exist. The real world goes on when Leonard resets, providing a consistent, unchanging narrative of objective reality. Leonard knows this, or at least he tells himself he knows it. He desperately needs to believe that his actions matter after he's forgotten them.
What we were trying to do is essentially present an idea of the tension between our subjective view of the world, the subjective way in which we have to experience life, and then our faith in an objective reality beyond that.
This tension is most clearly made manifest in Leonard's internal monologue at the end of the film.
I have to believe in a world outside my own mind. I have to believe that my actions still have meaning, even if I can't remember them. I have to believe that when my eyes are closed, the world's still there. Do I believe the world's still there?
This scene plays out like a series of self-affirmations. I have to believe, I have to believe, I have to believe. Do I believe? It's ironic though. Leonard's way of life is only possible because objective truth doesn't actually exist for him. So as much as he may reassure himself that his actions have meaning, and as much as he may truly believe they do, give it enough time and he'll be repeating the same words, driving away from another crime scene. If his actions don't have meaning outside of his own mind, then the pursuit of his purpose is vain, and the only thing he's living for is taken from him.
You living?
Only for revenge.
It's a conflicting give and take. The necessity of faith in objective truth, without realizing that your way of life is only possible in its absence. Leonard can't believe in anything. He can't remember to keep believing in it, whatever it was.
Don't remember.
He's an anomaly physically existing in the world, but in all other regards detached. Quoting from the short story, "Your advantage in forgetting is that you'll forget to write yourself off as a lost cause." He could do this till the day he dies. The final remark Leonard makes in his monologue touches on an idea that I referenced earlier in this video.
We all need mirrors to remind ourselves who we are. I'm no different.
Whether they're literal reflections of our image, or little things we put up around us to remind us of who we are, everyone has mirrors. Selfies, social media, the things we buy, notes we write, all of these things remind us of the person we are, or the person we want to be seen as.
My name's Leonard.
Leonard's right, we all do it. It's not inherently wrong, unless you're explicitly trying to convince yourself that you're someone you're not. It sounds kind of strange, because for normal people like us, it's basically impossible. We have an enormous backlog of memories that we use to fact-check who we are now to the person we used to be. If I took a picture of a brand new Porsche 911 and labeled it my car, I wouldn't begin leaping for joy. Obviously, I'd recognize that, hey, I can't afford that, and falsify the picture. With the awareness of who I am and the objective reality that I live in, I can determine what is true and what is false. Leonard is not afforded this luxury, and that is where his statement is wrong. He is different from us. His mirrors don't abide by the same rules. He trusts himself when he shouldn't. He has no idea what kind of man he was when he wrote his notes to himself. He's oblivious to the reality that he could ever lie to himself. Leonard knows that other people pose a risk for manipulating him, but he'll never realize that his biggest manipulator is himself. For the most part, Leonard functions adequately with his systematic life, with his mirrors. However, a day awaits him when he least expects it, where the stars align, the clues come together, and what do they form? A true mirror. Not a mirror that Leonard made for himself, a manipulated reflection of his subjective reality. No. Leonard arrives face to face with a true, objective reflection of himself. This is what happens during his confrontation with Teddy at the end of the film.
So you lie to yourself to be happy. There's nothing wrong with that. We all do it. Who cares if there's a few little details you'd rather not remember? I took that picture. Just when you did it.
In that moment where he sees the man he really is, where he becomes that genius, the savant, he has a choice. He can let the fire within him die, accepting who he is and what he's done, or he can pull out a pen and give himself some fresh clues to keep the game afoot and keep the fire alive. The choice he makes is no surprise. It's the same choice that Teddy from Shutter Island made. The first route would leave him devoid of purpose, a life of commercials and complacency, a body existing in a room. For that to really work, Leonard would need a permanent reminder of vengeance satisfied. All tattoos and clues need to point to irrefutable, unmistakable proof that his wife's rapist is dead. Each waking moment will still be met with the same invigoration for revenge as before. He'll just have to deal with that.
She's gone. And the present is trivia, which I scribbled down his f***ing notes.
But maybe he looks up at his ceiling and sees the words, "I did it," in large letters, and maybe after a few thousand times reading those words, some other part of the body starts to get the message and remembering gets easier. But that's not the path Leonard chose, nor is it a path he would ever allow himself to take. Though he lives his life in pursuit of that dream, where the gap in his chest is filled and his burning heart can find rest, when the cards are laid out before him, he refuses it. The weight of truth feels too heavy. He hates the man he really is. 10 out of 10 times, Leonard will prevent himself from ever becoming that man. At the end of the film, Teddy effectively summarizes Leonard's lifestyle.
You wander around, you're playing detective. You're living a dream, kid. A dead wife to pine for. A sense of purpose to your life. A romantic quest that you wouldn't end, even if I wasn't in the picture.
This romantic quest is where the paradoxical nature of Leonard's condition lies. In spite of his suffering and self-sabotaging, Leonard's life would cease to have purpose without the tragic hand he was dealt. That terrible incident that forever changed his and his wife's lives is what gives him purpose. His life exists for revenge, and he'll never be able to change that. He can't heal, he can't move on, he can't find a new purpose.
Probably burned truckloads of your stuff. Can't remember to forget you.
When nothing he does can ever stick, it's only a matter of minutes before he finds himself waking up again with his wife's face burned in his mind, freshly invigorated to get revenge. In this way, his condition extends an olive branch. In forgetting what he's done, he's able to keep going. Revenge gives him something to strive for, to feel valuable and alive. The anticipation of fulfillment keeps the fire burning within him. It's dangerous to place your life's purpose in something with a definitive end, i.e., revenge. If all your waking hours are spent pursuing a single goal, after a temporary high, you could be left emptier than when you began. This is especially true for Leonard. His long-term memory is permanently fixed, so he can't chase new dreams. His purpose was chosen for him, and all he can do now is play his cards to the best of his ability, in the way that will make him most fulfilled. And ultimately, can we blame him for that? Would you do any different? Wouldn't you try to put yourself in the scenario that made you the happiest and most fulfilled? Dealt a different hand, with a few minor adjustments, Leonard's life could actually be a benefit to society. But as it stands, men are being murdered for crimes they never committed on his account. By simply changing his last remaining long-term memory, the drive and passion that fuels his revenge could instead fuel a desire to save lives or reduce crime. In another world, Memento could be a lighthearted medical show or a vigilante superhero film. Simply put, the Leonard we have is probably the unluckiest man on the planet. The rest of his life will be spent lying to himself to satisfy his need for murder. He's a serial killer who thinks he's never killed before. His situation is hopeless. Luckily, he doesn't see it that way. Blindness to objective truth also means immunity to new pain and lasting discomfort. In the short story, the protagonist is even boastful about his condition. He says, quote, "But you're different. You're more perfect. Time is 3 things for most people, but for you, for us, just one. A singularity, one moment, this moment. Like you're the center of the clock, the axis on which the hands turn. Time moves about you, but never moves you. It's lost its ability to affect you. What is it they say, that time is theft? But not for you. Close your eyes and you can start all over again." The excerpt radiates a wounded confidence, a forced optimism that only exists as a result of his misfortune. But it only sounds that way because we are privy to his objective situation. In his subjective reality, things aren't so bad. He really believes he's more perfect. At least he did at the time he wrote it down to convince himself of it. Turns out, if you never realize how incredibly misfortunate your life is, your situation starts to seem pretty lucky. He takes pride in his way of life. He doesn't need his memory, neither does the rest of the world. All you need is fact.
Look, memory can change the shape of a room, it can change the color of a car. And memories can be distorted. They're just an interpretation, they're not a record. And they're irrelevant if you have the facts.
Leonard's reliance on fact prompts us to consider our own, perhaps over-reliance on our potentially faulty memory. This idea is supported throughout the film as various identical shots are repeated but with small changes to plant seeds of doubt. Leonard's life is one of duality. He's in constant conflict with the man he will become. He stops himself from ever reaching the life he longs for. His condition keeps him trapped in a destructive cycle, destroying his ability to live, but within that cycle, he created a way to thrive. His condition is the worst thing that ever happened to him, but since it happened, it became the best thing. Understanding the implications of Leonard's condition allows us to peel back the layers of who he tells himself he is and reveal the sinister manipulator he is beneath the surface. Even though that's the truth, it's difficult to blame him. To Leonard's knowledge, the lying, stealing killer from the past never existed, and that old version of himself has no influence on the man he is now. So with everything we know about him, where does Leonard stand morally? Is he good or bad? Justified or unjustified? To answer this, we need to ask ourselves what we value more, objective truth or subjective truth. From here, the answer becomes clear. Individual truth can never supersede objective, factual reality, and indulging it harms the individual, yes, but to a greater degree, it harms the people surrounding them. In my opinion, Leonard has to be held accountable for his actions. He's proven repeatedly that given the choice, he will enable himself to kill innocent men for the sake of his own happiness. And unless he's forcibly stopped, he'll gladly do it again. Thank you for watching.